I want to just kind of go position by position here, somewhat rapid fire. Just things we're looking forward to seeing, things we've heard, whatever it is, fleeting thoughts at each position. Starting at running back, I think to me, it's pretty apparent that right now this is a two-horse, a two-guy backfield with Donovan Edwards, Kalel Mullings. That is going to be your 1A and 1B, at least to start out, based on everything that they've said, based on everything we've heard. I know you always kind of hear the Ben Hall stuff behind the scenes, and Jordan Marshall could certainly work his way into the mix when he gets here in the summer. But right now, I think it's those two guys, and really, normally, given that they're both somewhat known commodities, you might say, hey, you know what? Take it a little easy on Saturday. We don't need to see anything from you. But I'd like to see Donovan Edwards, with this, you put weight on. You want to see him run through contact a little bit better, see the vision improve. And then Kalel Mullings is just the volume. I think he's a guy that deserved more carries last year. And going to be interested to see if they're split up or how that works on Saturday.
Yeah, I've heard from practice observers that Kalel Mullings is just an absolute stud, right? And we've seen him run hard. I love the way he runs. I do. And so let's see what happens with him. And Donovan is what we've heard, right? Hopefully it's not all or nothing this year. You do need somebody that can move the chains, make those 2-yard gains like Blake Corum did. And that wasn't Donovan last year, with all due respect, maybe he will be this year with more weight on him. But I think Kalel Mullings is that guy that we saw last year. He wasn't getting stopped for 1 and 2 yard gains, it seemed like, very often when he carried the ball. So I'm anxious to see what Ben Hall can do as well. The spring game hero from last year, right, was probably the most impressive back, with the guys who played. So yeah, that's where we are there. And Max Bredesen is a lead blocker, whether it's H-back or whatever. Anxious to hear him play football as well.
Did Caleb Downs know that Max Bredesen was still at Michigan when he decided to come to Ohio State? That's going to be, Max Bredesen's going to be, there's definitely going to be some pads popping. He's going to rattle a few fillings as the fullback. But yeah, no, everything you guys said about the running backs, I do think we'll probably see more Kalel Mullings than we see Donovan Edwards. Tony Alford talking, I think it was last week, about, how Kalel is still kind of becoming a running back. And I know he played there last year full time, but he said, just the ins and outs of the position and just being a running back, like identifying, as a running back. And I think that Kalel has been impressive in some of these spring games, and then obviously had some really nice runs last year. So will be good to see him. And my favorite thing about this may be, so it seems like they're split up based on the photo. Kalel will be on the maize team. Donovan will be on the blue team, but Donovan and Wink Martindale just feel like a duo, and Wink's the coach of the blue team. They just feel like a duo that was a match made in heaven. So I'm excited to see those two interact. And maybe if Donovan's out of the game after the first quarter or something like that, he'll help him coach, and we'll see how all that goes. But yeah, it should be fun. Yeah, there's the picture of Coach Wink there, head coach of the blue team.
Wide receiver, again, we talked about it earlier. Only really 5 scholarship guys right now. You have a couple freshmen that will arrive this summer. In terms of guys, we're talking about this probably being an ugly, low-scoring, probably defensively skewed spring game. So I don't expect any of these guys really to put up gaudy numbers. I guess if you want to throw a guy who was a spring game star last year was Peyton O'Leary, but a lot of that had to do with Amorian Walker, who just didn't do anything in the spring game. Was getting blown by a former lacrosse player. I think Fred Moore, if I had to target one guy to look at, someone stepping into that Cornelius Johnson role, really he's kind of their only quote unquote big bodied wide receiver on the roster right now. I'd like to see, because he got on the field pretty early last year. I'd like to see continued development from him there, because I think he's stepping into a role that we thought maybe Darius Clemens would have had if he stuck around. But I think they're pretty impressed with him, and he was trusted enough by JJ McCarthy, where we saw him running some routes, warming up for JJ at Pro Day. So I guess thoughts on guys at the wide receiver spot.
Yep. I'm thinking Fred Moore. They're talking about Jerry Jeudy, and the way he's running routes and things like that. That remains to be seen. But it's the big 3, right? I'm going to keep an eye on Fred Moore. He had a nice catch, I think, for 40 yards in the first game last year, in his first spring game, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, from Orgy. So they like him. I think Tyler Morris is going to be a really good receiver here, and I've thought that for a while. So, and we'll see what happens with Samaj. Very confident kid, that Samaj Morgan. So, but yeah, I'm going to wait to see the portal and see who that big receiver is. When we talk about big bodied with Fred Moore, he still needs to fill out. He's 6'1", but he still needs to get bigger and stronger. So, but that's where I am with that group.
What cornerback's lunch is Peyton O'Leary going to eat? We'll see. It's going to be hard to judge those two spots because we're looking at corners other than Will Johnson. And again, how much will he play? Not sure. And then we're looking at wide receivers, like who's going to step up. If one guy does really well, then you start doubting, especially after what happened last year with the O'Leary Amorion Walker thing, you start doubting, well, is that real or is the cornerback play just not up to par? So that'll be interesting to watch. But yeah, Fred Moore, Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris, kind of those three will be interesting to see, maybe what leaps they've taken, and then the other guys who steps up.
Tight ends. I think we know what Colston Loveland is. The guy by far I'm most interested in seeing, and actually someone who I thought played pretty well in last year's spring game was Marlon Klein, who Loveland himself said he's the biggest tight end on the team. He's the strongest. He's the fastest, kind of a guy that seems like a bit of a freak. Maybe we see him pop up on a list from Bruce Feldman later this year. Who knows? But with a lot of snaps available at tight end, we lose a guy like A.J. Barter. I think Marlon Klein is the guy to me that probably has the most intrigue at that spot going into Saturday.
Yeah, I think Bredesen's going to step up in a pass catching role too, like maybe the Barner type role, right? Not just be a blocker. He can catch. We've seen him. I think we saw him with a 50-yarder last year in the spring game, or maybe it was 2 years ago, but a downfield grab. So, or maybe it was in one of the early season games. He had a real nice catch. So, but he can do it. Josh Beetham to the portal. He was playing good football. It's hard to lose a guy like that. People could say, oh, he's just a walk-on, but he was running with the ones and twos, and they were heaping a lot of praise on him, fellas. So Marlon Klein better be the football player that they hope he is, because you can have the great body and you can be a great athlete, but not be a great football player, especially if you haven't played a ton. I think that's where Marlon Klein is right now. So hopefully he continues to improve, but boy, he's a big kid. So that group, it wouldn't stun me at all either, right? If one became available in the portal and they said, okay, we didn't have the money for Josh, but you know what, maybe we can go out and get somebody in the portal as well. I wouldn't be stunned to see that, but right now those are the guys.
Yeah, excited to see Marlon Klein. Max Bredesen did call him a freak. So you had that from Colston Loveland. I even followed up with Colston Loveland. Like, he's faster than you. And he said, yeah, he's faster in a straight line at least once he gets going. So Marlon Klein, yeah, want to see him. And Colston Loveland, I wonder how much we'll see of him during the spring game. But obviously he's going to be one of the big focal points of this offense.
Offensive line. I think it's a weird thing where you lose all five starters from last year, but then you look at a potential starting five of, let's just say left to right, Miles Hinton, Josh Preeb, Greg Crippen, Giovanni El Hadi, Andrew Gentry. If that's the five, when we talked to Grant Newsom a few weeks ago, they seem pretty at peace with what they have there, and they're excited about what they have there. And, I know they like to have 10 guys ready to go. I don't know if they're quite that deep, but could they have 7, 8 guys? I think they could, and I'd like to see them flex some of that depth on Saturday. But again, it's going to be split squads, so this is maybe the group that is the hardest to evaluate when you talk about a spring game setting.
Yeah, exactly. And, especially, I would imagine Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are going to be on opposite sides of the ball, in terms of on opposite teams, rather, in the spring game. And I hope that's the case so that nobody gets killed. Yeah, if they play. So, we saw Rashawn Benny. We'll talk about the defensive line, I guess, later. But, the big thing to me is the tackles. And, call me a skeptic when it comes to Miles Hinton at left tackle. Two things there, right? I thought he struggled in pass pro at right tackle last year. Hopefully he's better. And, how much does he really love football? And maybe that's unfair, but this is a guy who has the body and the wherewithal to be an absolutely dominant offensive lineman. And Drake Nugent kind of alluded to it last year when he was at Stanford. He said, he could pick guys up and we would see him move guys 10 yards downfield and, do that every play. And you're a first round pick. And that's what you really have to get out of him. So, and then I'm interested to see what happens at center with Greg Crippen. I think he's solid. Is he going to be up there with a Drake Nugent? There were times last year where Drake Nugent, did just enough. You saw him on the ground a lot, guys. He held his block just long enough. In that respect, I think Greg Crippen, might be a little bit better in terms of holding blocks and things like that. But Nugent was pretty special when it came to calling things out and, knowing his assignments and things like that. So those are the positions I'll be watching. Hopefully some of these guys are healthy. I know Gio El-Hadi's missed a little time this spring. So has Miles Hinton. So hopefully we can get a group out there at some point too, where we can see how they work together. But again, like you said, AB, they're going to be breaking them up a little bit too.
Yeah, and Hinton's a guy who's been hurt a lot throughout his career, including last year at Michigan. So depth is going to be important, and this will be our chance to see some of those guys, behind those guys. And yeah, Greg Crippen, I'm all aboard the hype train, so I'm excited to see that. And hopefully, with all the film he's apparently been watching, he should be able to call things out on the field as well. He's waited his turn, but doesn't mean you're owed anything. You got to play well, and I think that it'll be good to see him, kind of in that role. I agree. Like, I don't necessarily love what they have at tackle compared to even the last couple of years when you kind of had guys who are more NFL guards playing tackle. You have maybe a true tackle now in Miles Hinton on the left side, but is he really going to perform better than some of those other guys? And that's a big question. I will say this, Sharon Moore's never been afraid, or at least over the last couple of years, to go and get guys out of the transfer portal on the offensive line if he feels like he wants more competition in that room or more depth or a better player or whatever it is. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that either. But, for now, and this is in really the offensive line being split in half is one of the reasons why I think this will be a low scoring game, because you do have a little bit more depth on the D line, O line split up, a little bit more unsure about some of those guys, and they're going to be protecting the quarterbacks. And if KG and Mason do play, and I don't think I saw either of them in the blue team photo, so they might both be on the same team, which would be a little bit scary. Again, if they play, we know what these guys can do, so you don't want to get somebody hurt, knock on wood for everybody in this game. Number one key is to stay healthy, but it'll be interesting to see the battles in the trenches.
Well, speaking of those two guys up front, I think when you talk about the defensive line and Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, I think when we talk about a roster that has known commodities on it, that is probably the most known and the biggest advantage they'll have probably against any team they play this year is those four up front. So we won't spend too much time on them, but I guess when it comes to depth, when it comes to that second wave, are there any guys that either of you are targeting as keeping a close eye on in this game? I think for me, it's probably the aforementioned TJ Guy. We'll see if he rounds out into form as TJ Dude. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I like, he's shown flashes for years, frankly, and now it's his time. It's his time to step up, and he's out of the shadows. So he's the one, really. And, some of those other guys, Enoetta, what's he going to do? Has he taken that next step? Because they're going to need some of those guys, fellas, to do that. Take some of this is not the schedule where you're going to be playing, a half a game with your starting defensive line. And then, you're not going to be blowing that many people out this year. So it's a tougher schedule. They need some of those guys to emerge. Yeah,
Cam Brandt's my guy that I'm going to be watching. Excited about him. And, think he is that fourth edge that they need, along with TJ Guy, kind of on that second team. Is it as good as Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore were on the backup line as they were last year? No, I don't think many teams across the country are going to ever have something like that again. The depth and talent Michigan had on the defensive line last season. But yeah, Enoetta is a guy I think we'll probably see play inside. They've been experimenting with that, given some of the injuries there with Benny being out. As well. So yeah, we'll kind of see who steps up, because there are a lot of, proven commodities on that defensive line, but there are also a lot of snaps that other guys are going to have to play because they rotate there. I know it's not, Elston back there or Minter running the show right now, but I do feel like that, they're going to take a similar philosophy if they have the bodies to do that.
Linebacker, you lose a couple stalwarts in Junior Colson and Mike Barrett. But you're in a situation now where Jayshawn Barham has played a lot of football at Maryland. Ernest Hausman played a lot of football last year at Michigan, and obviously a ton at Nebraska as a freshman. You have a lot of confidence, those two. There's probably not going to be much of a drop-off there, which is kind of crazy to say. But the question with that group is depth. And look at the scholarship chart on the screen. Jaden Hood is a senior. We kind of, he's stuck around and waited for an opportunity. Jimmy Rolder is a guy who has made some plays, but hasn't quite put it together yet. Micah Pollard's a guy that always comes up, but I think when you go to the linebacker position, it's the look that you give this group on Saturday is the depth, because it sounds like there's a pretty notable and familiar name out there that might be re-entering this room before too long.
Yeah, if Nikhai Hill-Green comes back, that helps a lot as your third guy. Even then, though, if you only have three, Jimmy Rolder needs to step up flat out. So at least one more guy needs to step up, and that's probably why they are looking in the portal for one other guy as well. So I do like the big two. I think they're extremely athletic, right? But again, it comes back to depth. And if those guys can't, if those guys have to play too many snaps, then by the end of the year, they're going to be gassed. You remember what Junior Colson said a couple of years ago about the TCU game, right? He was pretty much spent. So hopefully somebody emerges. I'd really like to see Jaden Hood come out of nowhere and maybe be that guy. We heard that last year. It didn't really materialize. So, but I am anxious to see Jayshon Barham and what he can do. I've heard great things.
Yeah, I think he and Ernest Hausman are going to be tracking some dudes down. You're looking at vanilla playbook on offense. You're looking at, probably some basic concepts on defense, and that allows linebackers to just play fast and make some big plays. So again, those are two guys that they're in the camp of. We'll see how much they play on Saturday at least, but I feel comfortable about those two guys as you go into the year. Build the depth. Can Rolder stay healthy? Is Micah Pollard going to take that step? Jaden Hood, how reliable is he? And does Nikhai Hill-Green or somebody else join the group?
Cornerbacks, again, Will Johnson, as far as I'm concerned, put him in the hyperbaric chamber, put him on ice, unfreeze him like the Winter Soldier week 2 against Texas. Say the magic words you need to say to get him to be his normal vintage self. No questions about him at all. It's that other side of him. Right now it seems like a battle led by two sophomores in Jair Hill and DJ Waller, who each have things to like in their own respect. But like we talked about earlier, maybe room to add a guy in the portal. I think that Saturday, and again, Saturday, what we see Saturday, they have 15 or 13, 14, however many practices before that to, a film on these guys. So what we see one game in a vacuum, maybe we shouldn't put a ton of stock in, but I'm going to be, of all these position battles on the roster, I think those two are pretty fascinating because both guys are young and there's multi-year trajectory here as opposed to just grabbing a stopgap.
Right, and they've got to, Jair need to do mature a little bit. It sounds like he has. DJ Waller, not the speediest guy, right, but he's a strider. He's been banged up a little bit this spring as well, from what we understand. So hopefully get him back out there and see what these guys can do. So, but that's going to be the big question mark, right? Now, the good news is you've got a guy on the other side that's locking down half the field, right? And Will Johnson, who I think has a chance to be one of the best who's ever played here and has kind of proven it already, that he's on that trajectory. So excited about him and very interested to see which one of those young guys steps up. So, one more body isn't going to hurt guys if they go to the portal for sure and provide some. Remember, Josh Wallace kind of came out of nowhere last year. We were all, who's that next guy going to be? And it turned out to be Josh. So hopefully they can find somebody else and hopefully they have enough there to so that it won't be a weakness on this football team.
We haven't seen Jair Hill play football since the Nebraska game last year when they allowed that huge run at the end of the game, like 70-yard touchdown or whatever it was. Didn't play the rest of the year. So, he's a guy that impressed during the spring game a year ago, played a little bit kind of with the twos early on last season before he fell off. But DJ Waller, is Jaden McBurrows probably going to play in the slot and outside. What does he show as now a fourth-year player, technically a senior, redshirt junior? So those guys and then, Zeke Berry is probably who I'm most excited to see in the defensive back room because you can call him the safety corner, whatever at the nickel spot, moving between safety and nickel. Lamar Morgan said he could be the potential Mikey Sainristil replacement. So he's a great athlete, and you need somebody at that position to be able to do that, come up, make hits, but also cover on the back end. And we'll see what he can do in that regard on Saturday.
We moved to safety. Obviously, Rod Moore out with a knee injury, we presume, for the season. So that puts more weight on Makari Page and Quentin Johnson. And I simply say this as who I'm watching. Two names, Zeke Berry, Brandon Hillman, both guys they like a lot. two young guys that have an opportunity now. We talk about how those edge guys, in that 4-man rotation, all kind of played a starter's amount of snaps last year. Same applies at safety too, to a certain extent. So there's a lot of opportunity there for both of those guys.
If you would have told me before last year that Quentin Johnson was going to be one of the key guys in 2024 coming back that you were going to be relying on, I'd have been nervous. Now I'm not. I think the guy's played a lot of football. He's played great football here and has played his best football later in his career. So love him back there, and sounds like he's playing extremely well. If you look just at the depth chart, guys, one safety in each class there, one scholarship safety in each class, it looks like, they're going to need some help there as well eventually. But to me, there's enough there if they stay healthy that can be really good. And they feel that way too. They've, even without Rod Moore, they've said, we feel really, really good about this room. So that makes me feel good as long as they stay healthy. And again, it's going to come down to depth.
Yeah. One safety in each class, but if Rod Moore is hurt and if Zeke Berry's playing your nickel for you,
right,
that is an important position. You're really thin. Jacob Oden looks good, as a safety, but it's tough as a true freshman. Certainly we've seen that, hell, even Zeke Berry and Keon Sabb to a lesser extent, they weren't playable their first year really. And Zeke Berry hasn't played a significant role, and now he's a junior. So he still, had a lot to prove his first couple of years. So yeah, Quentin Johnson was a massive add. The fact that he didn't somehow get a combine invite, and that's probably, by nature of him not playing as much last year, consistently throughout the season, was huge, because he probably would have accepted it, and he probably would have been ineligible to return when he did in early March. So that was massive. And now, you try to build the depth, and I think those are a lot of the guys we'll be watching on Saturday, is the guys behind those two, Makari and Quentin.
All right, we round out with special teams. Again, I don't know anyone's here. If you've stuck around this long, I don't know if you're here for long snapper talk, punting talk, or whatever it is. But obviously, with what we talked about earlier, the kicker spot is, provides the most intrigue. Adam Samaha, obviously, they're one scholarship guy there for now. A couple others on the roster. I know Hudson Hollenbeck is one. The other names are escaping me because reasons. Any other thoughts on special teams? And, could we even see anything from these guys on Saturday to inspire?
Yeah, make all your kicks.
Reaction.
Make all your kicks in front of 40,000 people or however many are going to be there, right? And do it live, and then then maybe that will inspire some confidence and say, okay, maybe they don't, if they don't get somebody in the portal, maybe you'll be the guy. So Tommy Doman, we know, can kick a little bit as well, but doesn't like to do it, and it's not his forte. Love the fact that he's back as a punter. William Wagner coming back helps, but kicker's huge, and let's see what these guys do on Saturday. But I think they're definitely going to need to go to the portal, and hopefully they can find somebody.
Yeah, long snapper talk, punter talk. How about holder talk? Tommy Doman was the holder last year, but I assume he wasn't the holder, though, for Samaha. That was Hudson Hollenbeck. So I assume we're going to see Doman and Samaha battle this thing out and then see if, they add another name in the portal.